Good evening. My name is Tom Giroux. I'm on the board of directors for the Forest History Society Association of Wisconsin. And up on your screen right now, actually, yeah, up on your screen right now is our mission. You've heard me talk about this if you're a fan of our webinars every time. Inform, educate, archive, and publish. I'm not going to talk a lot more about that because tonight's webinar is actually the kickoff for our annual conference, fall conference, that's going to be in Manitowish Waters, uh, where Little Bohemia is. So, and some of you might be wondering how Little Bohemia is connected to forest history. Well, our presenter tonight is going to tell you exactly how it is connected to forestry. I just wanted to go over this a little bit. And Becky Gaskill, my coworker, is going to talk a little bit about the events on Fridays.
Friday is going to be a whole lot of fun. It's going to start at 8:30 in the morning with a registration at the Discovery Center, and then it's going to be tours for the majority of the day. We're going to tour the site of one of the earliest ranger stations on the NHAL forest, visit an original surveyor's blaze at a section corner along the lakeshore, which I think is going to be really neat. We'll also go to the historic Rest Lake Dam. Many of you know where Rest Lake is, but the dam is pretty rich in history. And then we'll do the Windman recreational trails, where we'll get to explore some of the aspects of the modern recreational trail system. We'll have lunch during the tours with the box lunch that people are signing up for. And then we'll tour the Papoose Creek State Natural Area, as well as a Manoomin stop, which is a wild rice stop, and ending with the Camp Mercer CCC. All of those tours will close up at about 4:30. We'll be coming back into the Discovery Center for the banquet. And Tom, if you want to tell everybody about that.
Well, ironically, the banquet's going to be at Little Bohemia Lodge. And it's going to have a nice dinner of either walleye or chicken marsala. And local author and naturalist John Bates, who wrote a book about old growth forest, is going to be our keynote speaker that night. And anybody who's listened to John is just an incredible, incredible speaker. So that'll be really entertaining and a beautiful evening right on the shores of the Manitowish Lake. Is it, Kay?
Little Star Lake.
Little Star Lake. Thank you. From there, we'll be on Saturday, we'll be back to the North Lakeland Discovery Center. There's a variety of presentations. Jim Boker, who's going to be heading off the first one, incredible historian, local historian that's involved with Manitowish Waters Historical Society. And he gives a wonderful presentation, and it's going to cover a lot of the background and history. We're going to talk a little bit about present day forestry. I always think it's important to juxtapose history against what's happening today and how things are different. We'll talk about, Kay will be back again to talk about the Historic State House Lake YCC camp. And just so you know, if you're looking for reservations, hotel reservations, there's still some rooms available, but you can also stay in one of the bunkhouses at the YCC camp for right on the Discovery Center grounds for a real reasonable price. And they do have modern bathrooms, so don't worry about that part of it. But we have a couple bunkhouses reserved for guests who want a maybe a little more affordable stay and to stay in a historical structure. And then we're going to end up with a riveting discussion more again about the dam history on the Upper Chippewa Basin. So registration closes September 24th. That's next Wednesday. So you've got a week to decide. And if you go to our webpage, Forest History Association, where you signed up for the webinar, you'll be able to sign up there for whatever portion you want. You can sign up for the tours, you can sign up for just Friday, just the banquet, or just Saturday. So it's a menu of choices. So I want to introduce tonight's speaker, uh, and that is Kay Krans, and she's a member of the Manitowish Waters Historical Society. And by the way, we wouldn't be able to do this conference because they've been such a huge help to us. Them and the Discovery Center and the Forest History Museum at the Discovery Center have all been a big help to the conference. So Kay went to undergraduate school at my alma mater, UW Stevens Point. Then she went to Mississippi State, and then she went on to become a high school history teacher and an adjunct lecturer on social studies and history. So with that introduction, Kate, wait, I missed a little bit about how the webinar runs. We're going to hold the questions to the end, but if you look down in the bottom, there's a chat button, which I have to enable yet for the rest of you, but I will do that right now. But you will enter your questions into the chat, and then we will go ahead and ask those of Kay, but that'll be after about a 40-minute presentation. If you're having difficulties, you can use that same chat button, hearing or something, to let me know, and we'll see what we can do to fix the problem. So with that, Kay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Tom. And I'm very excited to be here tonight to talk about Dillinger. And I encourage all of you to sign up for that dinner on Friday night, because as you walk into Little Bohemia, you're walking into a very similar set that John Dillinger walked into in 1934 and that Johnny Depp walked into when he filmed the movie Public Enemies at Little Bohemia, which only, I think, was about 10 seconds in the movie, but took him a month to get that film all put together. So, Dillinger. Why is Dillinger in a talk for the Wisconsin forest history people? I'm sitting here thinking, and I think it's perfect. It's a perfect match. In the 1930s, the bank robberies were so intense and Dillinger's gang was so wanted that he needed a place to disappear. And there were a lot of connections in northern Wisconsin with the Capone and the Chicago mob and the St. Paul mob and genuine local bootleggers. So this was a place to hide. So let's begin our story. This is the entrance to Little Bohemia in the 1930s. And if you'll notice, the forest does not look nearly like it does today as you drive down that road. So there's a lot of small trees around, which was really good cover for the FBI when they went to capture Dillinger. I think the entrance is really cool because originally those were white pine trees that had been cut and placed as that mile marker sign there. And today they're cement, but they're pretty, I think they look like original trees in that picture. So why did Dillinger end up in northern Wisconsin? Well, he had been robbing banks with such furor that there were 20 detectives on the Chicago police force looking for Dillinger, and the FBI was also looking for him. And he really was running out of places to hide. Everybody was recognizing him in the cities. He would hide in St. Paul, and then he would hide in Chicago, and then he would go back and forth. Now, St. Paul had a real interesting plan to keep crime lower. I think they were really thinking ahead. Of course, the police department was managed by the St. Paul mob at the time, but if you wanted to come to St. Paul to hide, you could come and no one would arrest you as long as you didn't commit a crime in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area. So you were supposed to register with the police when you got there. Well, once the feds got involved with the crimes of Dillinger, that no longer held true for him. So he and his gang of 4 other men, who I'll tell you about in a minute, went to Fox River Grove, Illinois. to the Crystal Ballroom owned by Louis Cernacki. And Louis Cernacki tells them that he knows a place where no one is going to find him. He has a really good friend. Now, if you look at the pictures in this slide, on the left, we have the owner of Little Bohemia, Emil Winnetka. And then we have Johnny Mayer, who was the 1919 U.S. lightweight wrestling champion. And we have Louis Cernacki, all up north at Little Bohemia at one time. And then we have a faked picture of Emil Winnetka with John Dillinger. And on the right, we have the Crystal Ballroom in Fox River Grove. So let me tell you a little bit about Emil Winnetka. Emil Winnetka came over from Bohemia, and he bragged that he had $1.10 in his pocket and no suitcase. And he became a self-made man. Well, the way he became a self-made man went through some criminal activity. He got involved in Kenosha, Wisconsin. That's where he ended up in the beginning of his life and his career. And he worked for the mob boss of Kenosha, who one night was murdered at the movie theater that he owned. And Emil Winnetka was indicated in that murder. So he was they couldn't get enough evidence against him till 1922, when a woman came forward and said she recognized Emil Winnetka leaving the scene of the theater murder. And also a knife was found in the alley by the theater that belonged to Winnetka. So in 1922, the police in Kenosha, along with Chicago detectives, went and raided Little Bohemia on Loomis Avenue and arrested Emil Winnetka and brought him back. So he was tied with a lot of people. But again, they throw him in jail and they decide that, well, they just don't have enough. There's too much circumstantial evidence. So off he goes back out into freedom, except in Chicago, he'd been in a car theft ring. And so he did get nailed for that and spent 14 months in jail in Illinois. But he became friends with a lot of important mob people. He used to brag that his little bar on Loomis Avenue in Chicago, his everyday customers were the Morant gang, the St. Valentine's Massacre people. So that just gives you a little insight. So Louis Cernacki says to the Dillinger gang, on April 19th, you got one night to stay here and then you got to get out. We're afraid you're going to get caught, and I don't want to be indicated in the capture of Dillinger and be aiding and abetting you. So he writes a letter to Emil Winnetka introducing the gang members. So here we also have a picture of Cernacki again, and down on the right-hand corner, we have the lawyer of Winnetka, and he happens to be also the lawyer of Dillinger. So there's also the question of whether Paquette told Dillinger about Winnetka as well as a safe haven to hide. So just wanted to add that with. By the way, Paquette was also a lawyer for people like the Capone family. So if you look at this map, this is a great highway for the gangsters. And as you look, we go through Palatine, Barrington, Fox River Grove, Woodstock, Lake Geneva, on up into northern Wisconsin. Now, when the gang left Fox River Grove, they left in 3 cars because there were 10 people going. Here again is the Crystal Palace. And here's the gang. On the left, we have John Dillinger, and then we have Babyface Nelson. Babyface Nelson is a psychopath, and he will kill on it doesn't take much for that gun to go off in his hand. Tommy Carroll is a really old, close friend of Babyface Nelson. Red Hamilton is really close friends with John Dillinger, and Homer Van Meter is also close to Dillinger. So we kind of have a gang, but we have two outsiders that have joined that aren't as trustworthy in Dillinger's mind, Carol and Nelson. And then the women that are going to go up north are Marie Conforti, Pat Sherrington, Jean Compton, who is Jean Delaney at the time. She has one husband in prison, and she has just married Tommy Carroll. So I guess she's kind of in trouble for that too. And then we have Helen Gillis Nelson, who is Babyface's wife. You know what I love about Babyface is he was a real family man. He had two kids, and he liked to take the family on his bank robberies before he got involved with the Dillinger gang. So isn't that nice? You know, the role model of the dad, go to work with dad day, go out and rob banks. And Marie Conforti was the girlfriend of Homer Van Meter. Pat Sherrington, Red Hamilton. And then we have the people that they're going to be involved with over the weekend. So that group of 10 is going to be riding north in 3 cars, and they're separated by about an hour each. So they're never traveling together. A really scary thing that happens on the way up north, they get to Portage, and Babyface Nelson's car slams into the side of a car at a crossway, and both cars are damaged and both pull over to the side. And the young couple in the other car get out of the car, and Babyface Nelson jumps out of his driver's seat, and he goes up to him and he goes, you know, we don't need to get the cops involved in this. And he said, we don't need the insurance company deals. He said, let's go find a mechanic at a garage and I'll give you cash. And that young couple was really lucky that they agreed to do that, or they probably would have been shot dead. So they went to the garage. They figured out how much it was going to cost for the young couple's car to get fixed. Babyface Nelson hands over the cash, gets back in his car, and takes off for northern Wisconsin. Now, here we are at Little Bohemia with 2 bartenders and the owner. So we have George Bazzo, he's about 25 years old at the time, as well as Frank Trauby, Local Boys, and Emil Winnetka. And then on the right, we have Emil Winnetka's wife, Nan Laporte Winnetka, with Shadow and Prince. Now, how does a gangster from Kenosha and Chicago end up in northern Wisconsin? Well, Nan Laporte was from a pioneer lumber camp family. Her parents ran a lumber camp on Grant Lake, and they ran one right by the CCC Camp 660. If you go on that tour with Jim Bokern, you'll probably walk down to the old lumber camp of the Laporte family. So they were from central Wisconsin and came up as lumberjacks and really became important entrepreneurs after the lumber was cut. They all got into the resorting business, guiding business. And today the family is still very prominent in Manitowish Waters. But Nan had a brother named Louis, and Louis was a really good bootlegger, and he needed to get his stuff down to the cities. So Nan was a single girl, young, pretty, and so they got the car rigged, and she would take whiskey down to Racine, Kenosha, and Chicago and deliver it for Uncle Louis, who he was fondly named. So one of her customers on the run was Emil Winnetka. So she and Emil fell in love and got married, and they had a child in Chicago. And she got nervous about the kind of people that he hung out with in Chicago. And she told him one day, gave him an ultimatum that he needed to get out of Chicago and she wanted to go home. So in 1929, between 1929 and 31, they moved back to Wisconsin and started Little Bohemia. Now, Shadow and Prince are dogs that are going to be really important to this Dillinger raid. Now, here we have Emil with a monster of a dog, and I don't know if I don't know if I would like to walk up to Little Bohemia and see that animal there. It looks pretty scary. So here I tell you again, he was a suspect in a murder, a suspect in a car ring, and owned a bar in Chicago and bought the lodge at Little Bohemia. This is a postcard, and by the way, you see the shape of his body. He was also a wrestler, boxer. And Cernaki, you know, that picture we saw earlier with the lightweight boxing champion there, or wrestling champion there, that's kind of how they got to know each other. And now we have Voss's Birchwood Lodge. When you come up for the conference, if you have time, you should go have a drink at Voss's Birchwood Lodge. They're open from 4 to 10. This building that you see here was one of the most premier hotel resorts in the state of Wisconsin. As a matter of fact, it's on the National Register of Historic Places. And this is where the FBI is going to end up, or the Division of Investigation, as they were called at the time. They're going to end up here setting up their attack at Little Bohemia. And here's Little Bohemia Lodge the day after the raid. And I want you to think about what this building looks like in this picture. And I want you to notice where the doorway is. The doorway is on the very left end, and that's the end of the building. When you go on Friday night on the 3rd, you're going to see that there's a huge addition on the left of this building that was done in 1936 in the middle of the Great Depression. Now, I think it's interesting that Mr. Winnetka happened to resort in 1936. I wonder where the money came from. Now, back to the Voss family. Why are they important to this story? Well, first of all, Ruth Voss on the right is the sister to Nan Laporte Winnetka. So Ruth Laporte and Nan Laporte are sisters. And Henry marries Ruth. Henry, I love this story. It's a love story, by the way. Is it okay if I tell love stories in a forest history meeting? So Henry Voss, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay. Henry Voss is at the young age of about 14, his father marries a woman after his mother has passed away, and she doesn't want the kids. So he kind of just gets kicked out of his house in Milwaukee, and he becomes an intern at a photography engraving studio. And he becomes a really talented photojournalist as well as a lithographer. As a matter of fact, he goes on to work for the Denver and Minneapolis Mints in his career. But anyways, he gets sick from the chemicals that he's using, and the doctors advise him, he's probably about 18 at this time, 18, 19. They advise him to go north for a period of months to the fresh, wonderful air of the northern forest. So what I think is really cool is he gets a friend and a canoe. They start out on the Milwaukee River, and they end up on the Manitowish River and camp close to Deer Park Lodge, another famous resort in the area. Well, we don't know what happens, but they get they get sick to their stomachs and get just deathly ill. And they paddle their canoe up to Deer Park Lodge, where Ruth and her mother are working for the summer. And Ruth helps this young man back to health. And pretty soon he leaves and writes a letter to her father and says, I have to marry this young girl. And that was history. So she moves out to Denver with him, and she comes up with the same story, not quite as bad as Nan's experience, but she says, I'm going to have a baby. I want to go home to the beautiful forests of Wisconsin. So they come back, and in 1908, they buy up cutover land for about 50 cents an acre, and they begin one of the most fabulous resorts in the Northwoods. Now, the weekend starts. The gang gets to Manitowish Waters on Friday afternoon within a 3-hour period of time. And really, I still have trouble with this story because these guys are dressed in Chicago 3-piece suits and overcoats and city hats. And there's girls are dressed to the nines in beautiful clothing. And they show up in April in northern Wisconsin. Now, I would think that people would kind of notice them. But they show up and the letter of introduction is handed to Emil. And Homer Van Meter says, Emil, we're here for the weekend and there's 10 of us and we need places to stay. And Emil looks at the letter. We never see the letter because the letter is burned. And he welcomes them to his establishment, but he swears to the FBI that he did not know who they were. And that's important because, you know, that thing about aiding and abetting is a little bit of a problem. So anyways, the gang comes in and Babyface Nelson, his wife, Tommy Carroll, and Jean Delaney get the cottage on the right. When you go there on Friday night, you'll see a really dilapidated cottage on the right. And Babyface Nelson's really ticked off to begin the weekend that way because he thinks that Dillinger always gets the headlines. Dillinger always gets all the attention. And now Dillinger gets to stay in the hotel and they have to stay out in this cold cottage that they got to keep shooting wood in the fire in the little potbelly stove. But anyways, the weekend begins and Friday night, they're served a steak dinner. And then the men ask Emil if he wants to play cards. Now, what's important to remember about that night is the place is open to the public. And another thing about the time period is Manitowish Waters, Woodruff, Arbor Vitae, everything is connected by party lines. So if you're at Little Bohemia and you go home and you call Mabel, your friend, and you say, oh my gosh, there's these city guys here. I wonder who they are. We can worry that maybe there's a lot of trouble going on. People are talking. So anyways, they're playing cards and Emil says, okay, I've got 3 10s and 2 queens. And he lays them on the table and he gets ready to pull the kitty because everybody else folds except for Dillinger. And Dillinger looks at Emil. He goes, well, he said, you got to hold off a minute here. He says, I've got 2 kings and 3 aces. But he never bothers to show his hand. He just pulls the kitty into his lap, which is about $35, which at the time is quite a bit of money. And by the way, that's when Emil says, oh, that's when I started thinking there must be something going on because his coat opened and I saw a double shoulder holster with 2 guns. But by the way, when they came, George Basil, one of the bartenders, was told to carry the bags upstairs. And he picked up one of the bags and he said, hey, Emil, what's going on here? He said, it feels like they got Tommy guns in here or something. And Emil told him to shut up. So anyways, we got to wonder, when does Emil realize it's Dillinger and how is he managing this whole weekend? Okay, so Friday night, everybody goes to bed. The customers are all gone. And Nan gets really uptight. She can't sleep all night because all she can hear are footsteps through the dining room and through the old bar, up and down the stairs. She can hear the phone up and down, up and down. And by morning, she's a wreck. And then, for some strange reason, after breakfast, Emil suggests they all go do target practice. And by the way, Emil says he was the best shot. Then little Emil, the 8-year-old son, comes out with a baseball and a glove and asks Dillinger to throw the ball. Because I don't know if you know this, but Dillinger was a really big baseball player in the prison system in Indiana. Now, did Emil Jr. know that he was a baseball player? I don't know. But anyways, they start playing ball, and Babyface Nelson says, let me throw the ball to the kid. And then he starts throwing it harder and harder and harder till he knocks the little boy the force of the ball knocks the little boy over. Nan's looking out the kitchen window and saw that and really gets mad. So she gets Emil to go into the office, and Emil says, this is where I really find out it's Dillinger. We start looking at a Chicago Tribune and we see the headlines. Wow, there it is, Dillinger's picture. Oh my God, we've got the Dillinger gang. So they write a letter in the office to the Bureau of Investigation, or the Division of Investigation, which today is the FBI, stating that they have the Dillinger gang at their place. Now they write a letter. They don't get on the phone and call Chicago. Now, why is that? Well, if the letter's sent, that covers their bases that they weren't aiding and abetting, because they tried to inform the authorities, but by the time the letter would ever reach Chicago, the gang would all be gone. And they could say, well, we couldn't use the party line because the gang members kept picking the phone up and putting it down, and they couldn't have anybody call. So anyways, Nan announces to everyone that she's going to take her son to a family birthday party at another brother's house, George Laporte. His son Cal's turning 8. Emil Jr.'s 8 years old. So she talks to Dillinger, and of course Emil said that they had to ask permission to go off the property. He always made it sound like he was being held hostage, but yet people were coming and going out of the business all weekend. So anyways, Dillinger gives Emil Jr. a bunch of nickels to take to the birthday party to give to the kids. It says, have a good time. And she and Emil Jr. get in the car and they start heading towards Mercer with the letter to mail. They go probably 5 miles, and she looks out her rearview mirror, and there's Babyface Nelson in a car following her. So how is she going to get that letter in the mail? Well, she sneaks off the highway and starts barreling down an old road, and he misses the turn, and she picks up her brother Lloyd, takes him the back way into Mercer. Lloyd gets out of the car and mails the letter, and she heads back towards Manitowish, where George is, and Babyface Nelson never finds her again. So at the birthday party, Ruth Voss and Henry are there, George Laporte, Uncle Louis, Lloyd Laporte, the whole group, the grandparents, and she starts telling them that she's really scared and that the Dillinger gang is there and basically keeping them all hostage. So the family plans to stop in on Sunday at several intervals and check on her and make sure everything's okay. And if she thinks they need to get help, they'll go get help. So Nan leaves her son with the family and doesn't bring him back to Little Bohemia. She goes back Saturday night. Again, she doesn't sleep all night, and her nerves are pretty much fractured. As a matter of fact, Dillinger said after that she was so shaky and nervous, he knew something was going on. He said, as a matter of fact, he said, I couldn't say anything to anybody without her figuring out what I was talking about. So he was getting uneasy. So Sunday morning rolls around, and about 10:30, Lloyd and George Laporte come into the bar, and they say, hey, sis, you got any cigarettes? We forgot ours. And she goes, yeah, I got a pack for you guys. I know you'll be good for it. And in that package, she hands them a note that says, go get help. Now, we don't know if Emil knew that note was there. There are some stories that say that Emil's the one that passed the pack, but I think it was all said that way in the news in 1934 so that Nan didn't feel like she was being recognized as the one that turned in the Dillinger gang. So Lloyd and George run down the road to Voss's resort. Henry has been chosen to be the one to get help. So he can't call because of the party line. So he drives 50 miles to Rhinelander. There he can get a secure phone line, and he calls the FBI. Now it's Sunday, April 22nd, and it's Easter Sunday. So the FBI people have all, it's a really skeleton group there in the Chicago office. But Melvin Purvis is alerted to this phone call from northern Wisconsin from a man who says, the man you want most, I know where you can find him. He's afraid, Henry's afraid to say the name Dillinger. And the agents say, are you talking about Dillinger? And he goes, is that the man you want most? Yes. So Melvin Purvis, who's the special agent in charge in the slide here on the right, calls J. Edgar Hoover. And Hoover says, do you think it's legit? And everybody says, yep, we think it's legit. Hoover tells Purvis to call Hugh Clegg, who's the man in the slide on the left. And these two prepare to take 16 FBI agents to northern Wisconsin. No one in the group has ever been to northern Wisconsin. They rent 3 airplanes. One of the airplanes in Chicago that they rent is a movie star's airplane because they just can't even find planes on the spur of the moment at this time. But anyways, so they get to the airport, and the pilots in St. Paul and the pilots in Chicago go, you're not getting on this plane with tear gas, and you're not getting on this plane with all these bulletproof vests. At the time, bulletproof vests weighed 28 pounds each, and these planes couldn't handle the weight, and they did not want to blow up with the tear gas inside. So now some of the agents have to drive this stuff up north. Now, Dillinger had told the Winnetkes that the gang was leaving on Monday morning. The FBI has been alerted about 12 o'clock that the gang is up there, and they've got this 358 miles or so to get there. So in the airplane, Melvin Purvis talked about, wow, he said, it was really quiet with the men he was with. He said, because we knew that there might be some that didn't return alive. And he kept feeling really depressed because they had no clue about what the terrain was like. They were going in blind. But they'd been embarrassed so many times by the Dillinger gang and hadn't captured them. They thought, well, this is it. They're going to be up in the middle of the Northwoods, and we're going to trap them. So the plane lands at Rhinelander about 6:30 at night, and two planes from Chicago, and the plane from St. Paul is already there. And Purvis had told Henry Voss to have a kerchief around his neck so he could recognize who he was. Well, 3 planes coming into Rhinelander on a Sunday evening in 1934 on Easter Sunday kind of aroused some interest, and some locals had come to see who was landing. And Melvin Purvis said they told him they were a big wedding party coming into the Northwoods early, and the people kind of went away. Well, Henry Voss drew him a crude map of what they needed to know, which left out some of the most important information. He told them that when they got to Little Bohemia, that they could send men out to the right and to the left. That's all he said, and the front. And don't worry about the lake. It's black ice. There's no boats, and they can't walk across it. So are you ready for what happens? It's pretty exciting. I bet you've all heard about that. There was a battle at Little Bohemia, but you didn't hear about there was other gun battles that night in the woods. So get ready. Now, here's 2 of the special agents involved in the case. W. Carter Baum and Jay Newman. Jay Newman is a Mormon preacher, lay preacher on the side, and he's a pretty darn serious, nice guy. Carter Baum has just moved from the New York office to the Chicago office. He's an accountant and a very likable guy. He was a tennis champion in college and George Washington University. So there they are. These 2 are going to get shot. One of them's going to die. So here's the layout of the place. So when I want you to walk around the building when you get to Little Bow, and on the back side there's a porch facing out to the lake, and up in the right-hand corner there's a window. But today there's that big add-on on the building on the back side. So you'll see it kind of in a little alleyway. That's the window on the left that John Dillinger, Red Hamilton, and Homer Van Meter jump out of. They jump out of that onto a ledge and onto the snowbank. These are FBI pictures from after the battle. In the front here, you see windows are open and Storms are sitting out on the porch of the kitchen because tear gas has filled the building by morning. Here's a little cartoon of Dillinger jumping out the window. Now, this is something that Henry Voss forgot to talk about to the FBI. This is the lakefront in the lakeside of Little Bohemia, which was not covered by the agents. The agents spread out on the left of the building and on the right of the building, but didn't have time to get all the way down towards the lake. And so this whole area that we're looking at in this slide is totally unguarded. And this is where the gang escapes. 4 of the gang members head north and Babyface Nelson heads south through the woods. What's interesting about this area is everything is close by the woods. By the lakes, you got a long way to go around to go to all the sites that we're going to be going to. So here's FBI agents the next day looking at that window that's broken or opened wide with the curtain hanging out. And then we see a car. Okay, I left the agents down in Rhinelander talking to Henry Voss, so let's see what happens to them. They start heading north. Rhinelander at the time is 50 miles from Voss's resort, and the roads are gravel, and it is April, and we have the breakup of the ice, and so the roads are rough. When they get to Rhinelander, they don't really realize the distance even, but then they realize they've got to have cars. Well, they go to the Ford dealership, Munson and Anderson in Rhinelander, and Munson says to Anderson, "My God, these guys are federal agents," and they don't know they're after Dillinger. Nobody's breaking that news that Dillinger's in the woods with them. They say that they're federal agents, and Munson right away says, "Oh my God, they're after the bootleggers." And who are his very best customers but the bootleggers? No one else is buying cars during the Depression but the bootleggers. If he gives them good cars, the bootleggers are going to never buy cars from him again. So he hems and haws and says, "Yeah, I don't have any cars to give you." So they commandeer some rundown cars they see on the street, and they commandeer one car that is a Ford coupe that goes 103 miles an hour, that this high school kid just happened to drive by them. And so they commandeered that car and they take that car. So they start out with 5 cars, of which most of them are dilapidated, and they start driving north. Henry Voss is in one of the cars with several agents kind of leading the pack. In the meantime, we have to go back to Little Bohemia because in the afternoon, Ruth Voss stops to see her sister Nan at Little Bohemia to make sure she's okay. She walks in the bar with her 20-year-old daughter, who's a pretty good-looking lady, and they walk in the bar, and Nan goes, "Oh, Ruthie, you got to come in the cooler with me. I got to get you some meat." She said, "We need meat. You probably need meat too." She's just freaking out. And Audrey saunters into the bar and sits down to this cute little guy and kind of smiles at him, and he goes, "You need a drink?" And she says, "Yeah, I'll have a brandy Alexander." Well, this is Audrey Voss, this 20-year-old daughter. While her mom's in the cooler in the kitchen, she's flirting with Babyface Nelson. Anyways, once in the cooler, Nan goes, "Oh my God, they're leaving. They're leaving tonight. Dillinger just told me that they changed their plans. They're leaving tonight. And Henry's down getting the FBI, and they're going to show up here, and there's not going to be any gangsters, and look at the trouble we're going to be in." And Ruth said, "No, calm down, Nan. You just got to calm down. I'll start out for Rhinelander and meet him on the highway." So she's kind of shaken too about dealing with all this. They come out of the cooler. She's got the meat in her hand, and she sees her daughter sitting at the bar with Babyface Nelson. And she goes, Audrey, you got to get off that bar stool right now. I'm taking you home. So boom, boom, boom. You might want to have a Brandy Alexander while you're at Little Bo in honor of Audrey. Anyways, they get in the car and they start heading towards Rhinelander, and they meet Henry on the road with the agents. And they tell him that by the time they get there, the gang may be already gone. So everybody's freaking out now. But I didn't tell you that on the way up, two of the cars break down. And so we've got the federal agents running on the running boards with Tommy guns and hanging on for dear life on the side of the car in the freezing April night. So they get up to Little Bohemia. They all empty out of the cars. They have minutes to get ready to go. They have this crude information from Henry Voss about the attack. And they start going down Highway 10 from Voss's Resort across the 51 bridge up to Little Bohemia, which is about 1.5 miles in the dark on the road. They turn into Little Bohemia, and cars go to the left and the right in the brush. And they get out of the cars and they start directing 5 agents to the left, 5 agents or 6 agents to the right. And all of a sudden, a bunch of barking starts. The 2 dogs, Shadow and Prince, start barking. And the FBI just knows that they've tipped off the gang. Well, Henry Voss forgot to tell them that the 2 dogs bark every time anybody comes near the place. So the gang is totally uninterested in dog barking. They're not worried about a thing. Henry Voss does not tell them that there are local people, that the place is open for business. They think that these guys are holed up there and they're the only ones there. That day, Easter Sunday, Nan had served 75 duck, steak, or chicken dinners at Little Bohemia while the gang was there. And by the time the FBI got in that parking lot and was starting to fan out, there were only 3 civilians left. And they happened to just come out on the porch right when the dogs started barking. And 2 of the guys were from the Civil Conservation Corps camp. The cook and the secretary, they were on a beer run from Camp 660 because the guy that ran the camp, that wasn't the military end of, he was the Forest Service end of it, said you cannot run a camp in Wisconsin and not reward these guys for how hard they work with some beer once in a while. So they had come down to Little Bohemia to pick up beer for a party at the camp. And the driver of the car was a brother of a CCC worker who happened to have a car. So his name was John Hoffman. So we've got John Hoffman, John Morris, and we've got Eugene Boisneau. They get in the car, they're talking loud. 2 other men come out on the porch, not on the porch, at the other doorway. How many members are coming outside? 5 men. So these guys automatically think, oh my God, it's the gang. So the car, 3 of them get in the car. They start driving towards 3 agents who open fire on this car. They yell, halt, stop 3 times. John Hoffman, who was driving the car, said, I don't know who it was. So then all of a sudden the car comes to a screeching halt. 2 of the men get out. One runs back into the hotel. The other one runs into a bunch of agents in the woods. And one is sitting there deader than a doornail, and they're all civilians. And the FBI realizes that when they crawl into the car and see that Eugene Boisneau is a CCC worker. So they're all shot up and whatever. So in the meantime, one of the agents, Carter Baum, knows he has been the one that shot the Civil Conservation Corps, the guy dead. So he wants out of there. He wants to go back to Voss's, and he and Newman go, here's the guns that were collected during the whole incident. A lot of guns. This is the kitchen at Little Bohemia. We've got Lloyd Voss and we've got Max Organist. And here Emil brags, you know, sure, I knew he was Dillinger, but why should I try to capture him? He said the FBI can't get him and neither can the Chicago detectives. So why should I try to take him? Here's the escape routes. Now, Carter Baum and Jay Newman get in a car. They go up to Manitowish Waters, pick up the town constable, drive back down and go to Kerner's Resort. And Babyface Nelson has escaped to the south and he's holed up in there trying to get a car. The rest of the gang goes north. Tommy Carroll goes all the way to Manitowish Waters and gets a car and gets off scot-free at the Northern Lights Hotel. And then Dillinger, Van Meter, and Hamilton go to another resort and steal a car. And everybody gets away scot-free. And here's the Paul Lang Sylvan Lodge where Babyface Nelson first goes. And here's the telephone exchange where Babyface Nelson is hidden when the FBI agents come with the constable. Here's Carl Christensen, who is shot 14 times, 8 in his body, 14 in his jacket. And here's all of the victims that are kidnapped by the group that night. We've got Robert Johnson, who has to drive Dillinger, Van Meter, and Hamilton to Park Falls. We got Ole Catfish, who Babyface Nelson ends up holding hostage for a week on the reservation. We got Paul Lang, who said he was a chauffeur for Babyface for a short time and he never wanted to chauffeur again. And then we have Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, who are held at gunpoint till Robert Johnson takes the Dillinger gang off. And this car that Robert Johnson owned ended up in the movie Public Enemies, and then was sold at auction in Phoenix at the Barrett Jackson auction for $165,000. You know, Dillinger's still making money even in 2010. Here's a picture of John Hoffman, the gas station attendant, John Morris, the CCC cook, and Eugene Boisano we don't have a picture of. Now, the U.S. Congress passed a law in order to help the victims that were the innocent people that were shot. Mrs. Boisano received $10,000 from the federal government. John Morris, $5,000. Hoffman, $2,500. And Carl Christensen, who was in the bed at the Runstrom Hospital in Ironwood, Michigan, with his injuries, was given $3,500 because Babyface Nelson shot him so many times. And the 3 women that were still at the hotel when the FBI put the tear gas in came out and said, "We surrender." They took them to Madison, they interrogated them, and then they let them go, hoping they'd find the gang. So there's the add-on to Little Bohemia as it is today. And then John Dillinger's father comes up north and starts running a museum with all the clothes that were left at Little Bo. And by the way, Winnetka goes to Europe for 3 months in 1936 on a European tour, and in 1935 an African safari. I wonder where the money is. And then the gang is killed. Dillinger is killed July 22nd at the Biograph Theater. Billy Frechetta's girlfriend is in prison for 2 years for aiding and abetting. And the rest of the boys are all dead. Everybody dies. Hamilton dead in 34, Carroll 34 of June, Dillinger July, Homer Van Meter August, and Babyface Nelson in November. And the only FBI agent ever killed in the state of Wisconsin was killed by Babyface Nelson on April 23rd, 1934 at Kerner's Resort across from Voss's Resort. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you very much. Very exciting. I always say I get to ask the first question because that's the benefit of being the facilitator of these. So, um, gosh, with the road conditions, the way they were, how long did it take them to drive from Chicago all the way to Manitowish Waters?
Well, those two cars arrived almost at morning light on Monday morning. So the tear gas never got thrown into the lodge until daylight. So what's so weird is Emil Winnetka came out of that lodge after the shootings right there. And he had his hands in the air and he said to the FBI, I'm the owner. And he took the two bartenders with him. And he said immediately, they're all still in here. And every one of them was escaping out the windows. And I'll always question, why did he say that? Was he trying to give the gang time to get away? Was he trying to cover that the gang wouldn't come after him after? Or was he busy, had he been busy trying to get rid of the money or hide the money that might have been left behind? We'll never know.
So Becky, you want to check the chat out and see if there's anything there?
Yeah, well, I have a question too, actually. Was there any indication that any of the other patrons on that Friday night knew that they were dining or drinking with the Dillinger gang? Did anybody else have a clue?
That's never been talked about in any of the sources that I've used, except that when Dillinger got to the Mitchell's house, escaping and trying to get to Robert Johnson's car, Mrs. Mitchell looked at him and she goes, "You're John Dillinger." And I often wondered why she would just say that off the top of her head. You know?
Sure. Well, and there was a side note also in the chat from Jim Kirkman. He said, in case there are any foresters in the audience, the Society of American Foresters is determining the number of continuing forestry education credits for attending the conference. So he just wanted to let people know that as well.
I also wanted to mention, as long as we're talking about the conference a little bit, that if you become a member, you will save $20 on the registration fee. So it's like if you go to the conference, you'll get a free year's membership to the Forest History Association, provided that you're not already a member. So,
you know, one thing I wanted to add about forest history is that as soon as the FBI came up without telling any local law enforcement, but then when all the shootings started, everybody's screaming for help. And a lot of the Wisconsin Conservation Department people got involved in the search through the woods for these guys, which they never found them, but they were all involved.
Also in the Q&A, Mary had said that she grew up in Kenosha and she knew that there were a lot of a lot of the gangs found the town safe because Kenosha is an Italian city. So that's pretty interesting.
And tell her that the man that Winnetka was accused of killing was named Pacini, Pacini. Sounds like an Italian.
So as long as Kay can tell a story, I can tell a story. I already told her this, so that won't be news to her. But my mother went to prom with that 8-year-old boy that was catching the ball in the yard at Little Bohemia. She was in
That's pretty cool.
Ironwood, and evidently she was a good catch, and they went to prom together. And years afterwards, my mother would stop there for dinner, and Emil Winnetka Jr. would show us around. It was kind of fun.
You know, can you imagine too, Emil Winnetka Sr. sent flowers to Dillinger's funeral. I would think he would be a little ticked off at the fact of his place getting shot up. And and then 2 summers later, John Dillinger Sr. is up north working for Emil and selling quarter passes to the museum to look at Dillinger's shirts and the ladies' high heels, and
Yeah.
a real entrepreneur.
You know, it is, even today, it's a little bit of a destination for people to go see, especially since the movie came out. You know, a lot of people go there. So, like you said, Dillinger's still making money for somebody
Right.
in the Northwoods right now.
Yep.
Any other questions out there? I mean, it was really fascinating. I just, the Boss's Resort, I mean, it's kind of noted as being one of the oldest resorts in the Northwoods, and it's really an interesting place, like Kath Key mentioned. So, yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing anybody at the conference that wants to learn about the Youth Conservation Corps.
Yeah, that tour will be on Saturday. Rather than get all tired after eating lunch, we're going to walk around and look at the facilities there. And maybe, Kay, you want to talk a little bit about your museum that you're putting together, as long as we got a minute.
Well, at the North Lakeland Discovery Center was the very first Youth Conservation Corps camp in the country. It opened in 1961. And I think we should really be proud that our state and one other state came up with the idea of creating the Youth Conservation Corps for high school students to work in the forest and learn about possibilities of their finding occupations in the forestry industry. And that program the state program went from 1961 to 1995. And during the Gaylord Nelson became senator after he was governor, he's the one that really sparked the idea in Wisconsin. And then he went on to the U.S. Congress. And in 1971, Nixon signed into law the Federal Youth Conservation Corps, which still exists today. And he used, when they were doing research through creating this law or this bill, they used State House Lake as an example of what a camp was like. And Britzmaster said to the counselors in the summer of '64, I believe it was, that what you do here this summer may determine thousands and thousands of hours of work in America's forests. So I think I'm pretty proud of the fact that it was right there where we're going to be at the conference.
Correct. We even have a couple of campers that are going to come and stay in the bunkhouses for good old sake. Like I said, it's quite the deal. It's much cheaper than $200 for a hotel.
Yeah.
So if you want,
And the lake is so pretty there. You can go for a swim in the morning. Nice October swim.
Yeah. You know, and we are going to be at Camp Mercer for the really nice interpretive trail there that Jim and the Historical Society have put together. I think they're trying to bring history to life by getting people out to look at the actual historical aspects in the Northwoods, not just walk through a museum and look at old photos, you know what I mean?
I want you to be sure if you go on the tour of the CCC camp that you look at the entrance, because we recreated it to look the way the boys built it. So when you go, you see exactly what it was like in '34. And we had a great time making a big rock mound for you to welcome you to camp.
Yeah. And as you said, even the pictures of the camp that from the day, you can tell it's all cut over land.
Yep.
Today, it's all densely wooded, as is Little Bohemia. But in the time period, it was, you can tell it was all cut over land.
Great.
Anything else in the comment section, Becky?
There are a lot of people saying thanks for the great talk and very informative. They really enjoyed watching. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are thanking you, Kay, for all of your information. I thought it was a great talk myself.
I'll tell them how to look for the bullet holes at Little Bohemia.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Hope to see you at the conference. Take a look at our website. Registration's open through next Wednesday, so we still have room, and we'd love to have you, and it'll be a great experience. Night, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Oh, just one other thing quickly before you hang up. You will get a survey. We appreciate your feedback. So when you close it out, you'll get a survey. We'd appreciate it if they get back to us. Thanks.